All right, I think we're ready now. Yeah. All right. As I said before, we can maintain the nuclear weapons of the United States, but there are a few technical difficulties we sometimes have with our meeting. Welcome back. Gerald Kimball from the Arms Control Association. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, your conversations with your colleagues. And as we heard this morning from State Representative Ryan Wilcox and Dr. Garwin and Dr. Sykes, the national security case for the test ban treaty would appear to be stronger than it ever was, and there's growing recognition that by Democrats and Republicans that it's an essential part of a 21st century U.S. nonproliferation strategy. And it's been many years since the United States stopped nuclear test explosions, approaching 20. It was 1996 when the treaty was ratified, was open for signature, but the treaty will not enter into force without U.S. leadership. The U.S. was the first to sign the treaty. The remaining states, in many ways, are waiting for the United States to move forward. We've seen the beginnings of that with President Obama's Prague speech, in which he committed the United States once again to reconsider and pursue entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And just this past March, on March 29th, I believe, President Obama's National Security Advisor, Tom Donilon, reiterated that message when he said, and I quote, "We are committed to working with members of both parties in the Senate to ratify the CTBT, just as we did with New START. We have no illusions that this will be easy, but we intend to make our case to the Senate and to the American people," unquote. So this meeting, as I said before, is the Arms Control Association's effort, one of our efforts to begin that conversation. And we're very pleased to have with us today somebody who has long recognized the value of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, who has been making the case for the CTBT for quite some time. As a member of Congress representing 2 national laboratories and as the chair of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee, Ellen Tauscher was, and as is often said, one of the handful of members of Congress with the deep knowledge and expertise on these weapons-related security issues that are out there. And this is just one of the reasons why she was asked by President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton to serve as our Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. So we're very pleased to have with us Undersecretary Tauscher, who's well-informed and very dedicated and a very resilient person who's, as many of you know, has had to overcome a great deal this year, not just in the arms control field. So it's with particular pleasure that we have with us Ellen Tauscher. Please join me in welcoming her today.
Thank you very, very much, Daryl. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank my very good friend, Daryl, for having me here today. The good news is that not only is the state of arms control in good shape, but I am too, and so I'm glad to be here. Let me just say that Daryl is, of course, one of the world's most tireless advocates for arms control, especially banning nuclear testing. And his work of the last 10 years at the Arms Control Association was recognized by the MacArthur Foundation last year, and it is tremendously important to our efforts to move forward on so many of these different issues. So thank you, Daryl, for your friendship and your leadership. Many of you have heard me speak, probably more than you'd like to recount, about what this administration intended to do and intended to accomplish, and now we know what we have accomplished. In the 2 years since President Obama's Prague speech, the administration has taken significant steps and dedicated unprecedented financial, political, and technical resources to prevent proliferation, to live up to our commitments, and to move toward a world without nuclear weapons. Under President Obama's leadership, we have achieved the entry into force of the New START agreement, adopted a nuclear posture review that promotes nonproliferation and reduces the role of nuclear weapons in our national security policy. And we have helped to achieve a consensus action plan at the 2010 Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty Review Conference. And I think I saw Susan Burke here. There she is. Susan, of course, was indefatigable in traveling the world in preparation for the PrepCon and was absolutely, for the RevCon, and was absolutely instrumental to our achieving a consensus in May of last year in New York, and I want to thank her publicly for all of her efforts. She's just really amazing. Under the President's, that's right. That's right. The Obama administration also convened the successful 2010 Nuclear Security Summit, helped secure and relocate vulnerable nuclear materials, led efforts to establish an international nuclear fuel bank, and increased effective multilateral sanctions against both Iran and North Korea, and now I know why I'm tired. But let me say that we have so many people that work very hard in, as you know, a State Department, we're called T, and we have so many people, over 600 people that work so hard on these issues, and let me tell you that it is wonderful to help lead that organization and to be in a place now where we have delivered over 2 years, I think, some very, very significant public policy initiatives with the leadership of both President Obama, Secretary Clinton, and in many cases, Secretary Gates. As for what's next, our goal is to move our relationship with Russia from one based on mutually assured destruction to one that is based on mutually assured stability. We want Russia inside the missile defense tent so that it understands that missile defense is not about undermining Russia's strategic deterrent. Even though this is a bipartisan goal, both President Reagan and President Bush both supported missile defense cooperation. It will not be easy. I know that many of you have opposed missile defenses. I have as well, when the plans were not technically sound or the mission was wrong. But this administration is seeking to turn what has been an irritant to the United States and Russia relations into a shared interest. Cooperation between our militaries, scientists, diplomats, and engineers will be more enduring and build greater confidence than any other type of assurances we can give. We are also preparing for the next steps in nuclear arms reduction, including, as the President has directed, reductions in strategic, non-strategic, and non-deployed weapons. We are fully engaged with our allies in this process. But let me turn to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. President Obama vowed to pursue ratification and entry into force of the CTBT in his speech in Prague. In doing so, the United States is once again taking a leading role in supporting a test ban treaty, just as it had when discussions first began more than 50 years ago. As you know, in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States ratified the Limited Test Ban Treaty, which banned all nuclear tests except those conducted underground. The Cuban Missile Crisis, which was about as close as the world has ever come to a nuclear exchange, highlighted the instability of the arms race. Even though scholars have concluded that the United States acted rationally, that the Soviet Union acted rationally, and even Fidel Castro acted rationally, we came perilously close to nuclear war. Luck certainly played a role in helping us avoid nuclear catastrophe. In the months after the crisis, President Kennedy used his newfound political capital and his political skill to persuade the military and the Senate to support a test ban treaty in the hopes of curbing a dangerous arms race. He achieved a limited test ban treaty, but aspired to do more. Yet today, with more than 40 years of experience, wisdom, and knowledge about global nuclear dangers, a legally binding ban on all nuclear explosive testing still eludes us. This being Washington, everything is seen through a political lens. So before discussing the merits of the treaty, let me talk about this in a political sense for a moment. I know that the conventional wisdom is that the ratification of New START has delayed or pushed aside consideration of the CTBT. I take the opposite view. The New START debate in many ways opened the door for the CTBT. Months of hearings and debate and 9 long days of floor deliberations engaged the Senate, especially its newer members, in an extended seminar on the composition of our nuclear arsenal, the health of our stockpile, and the relationship between nuclear weapons and our national security. When the Senate voted for the treaty, it inherently affirmed that our stockpile is safe, secure, and effective, and can be kept so without nuclear testing. More importantly, the New START debate helped cultivate emerging new arms control champions, such as my friends Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Senator Bob Casey, who I know Bob was here earlier today and Jeanne will be here this afternoon. Before the debate, there was not a lot of muscle memory on treaties, especially nuclear treaties, in the Senate, and now there is. So we are in a strong position to make the case for the CTBT on its merits. To maintain and enhance that momentum, the Obama administration is preparing to engage the Senate and the public on an education campaign that we expect will lead to ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. In our engagement with the Senate, we want to leave aside the politics and explain why the CTBT will enhance our national security. Our case for treaty ratification consists of three primary arguments. One, the United States no longer needs to conduct nuclear explosive tests, plain and simple. Two, a comprehensive test ban treaty that has entered into force will obligate other states not to test and provide a disincentive for states to conduct such tests. And three, we now have a greater ability to catch those who cheat. Let me take these points one by one. From 1995 to 1992, the United States conducted more than 1,000 nuclear explosive tests, more than all other nations combined. The cumulative data gathered from these tests have provided an impressive foundation of knowledge for us to base the continuing effectiveness of our arsenal. But historical data alone is insufficient. Well over a decade ago, we launched an extensive and rigorous stockpile stewardship program that has enabled our nuclear weapons laboratories to carry out the essential surveillance and warhead life extension programs to ensure the credibility of our deterrent. Every year for the past 15 years, the Secretaries of Defense and Energy, from Democratic and Republican administrations, and the directors of the nuclear weapons laboratories have certified that our arsenal is safe, secure, and effective. And each year we have affirmed that we do not need to conduct explosive nuclear tests. The lab directors tell us that stockpile stewardship has provided deeper understanding of our arsenal than they had ever thought of when testing was commonplace. Think about that for a moment. Our current efforts go a step beyond explosive testing by enabling the labs to anticipate problems in advance and reduce their potential impact on our arsenal, something that nuclear testing could not do. I, for one, would not trade our successful approach based on world-class science and technology for a return to explosive testing. The Obama administration has demonstrated an unprecedented commitment to safe, secure, and effective arsenal so long as nuclear weapons exist. Despite the narrative put forward by some, the Obama administration inherited an underfunded and underappreciated nuclear complex. We have worked tirelessly to fix that situation and ensure our complex has every asset needed to achieve its mission. President Obama has committed $88 billion in funding over the next decade to maintain a modern nuclear arsenal, retain a modern nuclear weapons production complex, and nurture a highly trained workforce. At a time when every part of the budget is under a microscope, this pledge demonstrates our commitment and should not be discounted. To those that doubt our commitment, I ask them to put their doubts aside and invest in the hard work to support our budget requests in the United States Congress. When it comes to the CTBT, the United States is in a curious position. We abide by the core prohibition of the treaty because we don't need to test nuclear weapons, and we have contributed to the development of the international monitoring system. But the principal benefit of ratifying the treaty, constraining other states from testing, still eludes us. That doesn't make sense to me, and it shouldn't make any sense to the members of the Senate. I do not believe that even the most vocal critics of the CTBT want to resume explosive nuclear testing. What they have chosen instead is a status quo where the United States refrains from testing without using the fact to lock in a legally binding global ban that would significantly benefit the United States' national security. Second, A CTBT that has entered into force will hinder other states from advancing their nuclear weapons capabilities. Were the CTBT to enter into force, states interested in pursuing or advancing a nuclear weapons program would risk either deploying weapons that might not work or incur international condemnation and sanctions for testing. While states can build a crude first-generation nuclear weapon without conducting nuclear explosive tests, they would have trouble going further, and they probably wouldn't even know for certain the yield of the weapon they built. More established nuclear weapon states could not, with any confidence, deploy advanced nuclear weapon capabilities that deviated significantly from previously tested designs without explosive testing. Nowhere would these constraints be more relevant than in Asia, where you see states building up and modernizing their forces. A legally binding prohibition on all nuclear explosive testing would help reduce the chances of a potential regional arms race in the years and decades to come. Finally, we have become very good at detecting potential cheaters. If you test, there is a very high risk of getting caught. Upon the treaty's entry into force, the United States would use the International Monitoring System to complement our own state-of-the-art national technical means to verify the treaty. In 1999, not a single certified IMS station or facility existed. We understand why some senators had doubts about its future untested capabilities. But today, the IMS is more than 75% complete. 254 of the planned 321 monitoring stations are in place and functioning. And 10 of the 16 projected radionuclide laboratories have been completed. The IMS detected both of North Korea's 2 announced nuclear tests. While the IMS did not detect trace radioactive isotopes confirming that the 2009 event was in fact a nuclear explosive test, there was significant evidence to support an on-site inspection. On-site inspections are only permissible once the treaty enters into force. An on-site inspection could have clarified the ambiguity of that 2009 test. While the IMS continues to prove its value, our national technical means remain second to none, and we continue to improve on them. Last week, our colleagues at the NNSA conducted the first of a series of source physics experiments at the Nevada Nuclear Security Site. These experiments will allow the United States to validate and improve seismic models and the use of new generation technology to further monitor compliance with the CTBT. Senators can judge our overall capabilities for themselves by consulting the National Intelligence Estimate released last year. Taken together, these verification tools would make it difficult for any state to conduct nuclear tests that escape detection. In other words, a robust verification regime carries an important deterrent value in and of itself. Could we imagine a far-fetched scenario where a country might conduct a test so low that it would not be detected? Perhaps. But could a country be certain that it would not be caught? That is very unclear. Would a country be willing to risk being caught cheating? Doubtful, because there are significant costs to pay for those countries that test. So we have a strong case for treaty ratification. In the coming months, we will build upon and flesh out these core arguments. We look forward to objective voices providing their opinions on this important issue. Soon, the National Academy of Sciences, a trusted and unbiased voice on scientific issues, will release an unclassified report examining the treaty from a technical perspective. The report will look at how the United States ratification would impact our ability to maintain our nuclear arsenal and our ability to detect and verify explosive nuclear tests. Let me conclude by saying that successful U.S. ratification of the CTBT will help facilitate greater international cooperation on other elements of the President's Prague agenda. It will strengthen our leverage with the international community to pressure defiant regimes like those in Iran and North Korea as they engage in illicit nuclear activities. We will have greater credibility when encouraging other states to pursue nonproliferation objectives, including universality of the additional protocol. In short, ratification helps us get more of what we want. We give up nothing to ratify the CTBT. We recognize that a Senate debate over ratification will be spirited, vigorous, and likely contentious. The debate in 1999, unfortunately, was too short and too politicized. The treaty was brought to the floor without the benefit of extensive committee hearings or significant input from administration officials and outside experts. We will not repeat those mistakes, but we will make a more forceful case when we are certain the facts have been carefully examined and reviewed in a thoughtful process. We are committed to taking a bipartisan and fact-based approach with the Senate. For my Republican friends who voted against the treaty in 1999 and might feel bound by that vote, I have one message: don't be. The times have changed. Stockpiled stewardship works. We have made significant advances in our ability to detect nuclear testing. As my good friend and fellow Californian George Shultz likes to say, those who opposed the treaty in 1999 can say they were right, but they would be more right to vote for the treaty today. So we have a lot of work to do to build the political will we need to ratify the CTBT. Nuclear testing is not a front-burner issue in the minds of most Americans, in part because we have not tested in nearly 20 years. To understand the gap in public awareness, just think of the fact that in 1961, some 10,000 women walked off their job as mothers and housewives, just as we celebrated Mother's Day just the other day, to protest the arms race and nuclear testing. Now, that strike did not have the same impact as the nonviolent marches and protests to further the cause of civil rights. But the actions of mothers taking a symbolic and dramatic step to recognize global nuclear dangers show that the issue has resonance beyond the Beltway, beyond the think tank world, and beyond the ivory tower. That level of concern is there today, and we need your energy, your organizational skills, and your creativity to tap into it. If we are to move safely and securely to a world without nuclear weapons, then we need to build the requisite political support that can only be done by people like you. I want to thank you very much for all of your support for many of the different issues that the President and others have espoused, and I would be very happy to entertain an easy question or two. If it's a hard question, I'm going to turn it to Darrell.
I think you can handle yourself, Ellen. Thank you very much. Please join us. I think we can start out with a few questions from this table over here, which happens to be some interesting people who write for newspapers. So please raise your hand, and Jadon will give you a microphone.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Susan Cornwell.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, with Reuters. What's your timeline for ratification in the Senate? When would you like to get it done before 2012 and elections, and do you think you can?
Both President Obama and Vice President Biden and Secretary Clinton have made it very clear that there will be no action on the floor until the argument has been made and until we find ourselves in a position to go for ratification. We were greatly aided last December in the most unlikely time to ratify the New START treaty during the most political time of the year by the fact that 73% of the American people were for ratification of New START. There is a level of scrutiny for anybody that takes a vote. I did it for 13 years. You want your constituents with you. And it's important that we bring the American people to a place where they can actually influence how the Senate votes. And so that will take some time. I cannot predict when we will when the President will make the choice to send the treaty to a vote, but I will tell you that we intend to win that vote. And so whatever it takes to make that argument, and how long it takes to make that argument, the President is committed to do that.
Okay. Anybody else on the reporter's table? All right. Then let's go to the folks in the back. Jadon, the gentleman right there. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Andrei Surzhansky. I'm with ITAR Testing Agency of Russia. Madam Secretary, thank you for your remarks. Can you update us on your recent meetings with your Russian counterpart, Mr. Ryabkov? Is there any progress on nuclear tactical weapons? And when do you think you will start formal negotiations on this issue? Thank you.
Well, President Obama has said that within the next year, February of last year till February of next year, we would like to begin conversations with the Russians on a panoply of issues. Missile defense cooperation, we're currently talking to them, and obviously strategic, non-strategic, and non-deployed weapons. Right now, we are moving forward together in the implementation of the New START Treaty. We've already had one exchange, which is very important to get it off to a good start. You know, as the President has said, he is interested in beginning this conversation as soon as possible. My sense of it is that we will continue to work issues as they are coming forward, and that we would look to go on to this next steps, as we call it, in arms control sometime later in the year. But what's important to note here is that we start the New START Treaty off on the right foot. I think we have. And what we believe with Russia, as I said earlier, is moving away from a time of mutually assured destruction to a time of mutually assured stability. And we believe that cooperation and engagement is the best way for us to do that. On missile defense, for example, we no longer target each other. We haven't targeted each other for a very long time. But there are still lingering doubts about whether our limited missile defenses, which are robust enough to deal with a Iranian and North Korean threat, but certainly could not undercut Russia's strategic deterrent, that is actually the fact. So it's important that we continue, but I will tell you that the reset is not only successful in holding, but has been a very important initiative for this administration, and it has accrued benefits in national security to the American people and to our allies, but that we have much more work to do.
Let's go to the back, please. Take your pick, Freddie. I can't quite see anyone there. Yes.
Thank you. Ava Spolin, retired State Department, former Assistant Secretary for Arms Control.
Good to see you.
Madam Secretary, thank you for your remarks. And I wonder if you could say, following up on the last question, a few words about the dynamics with our allies, about the potential negotiations on non-strategic weapons.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, following on the strategic concept that was worked very successfully by Madeleine Albright and her team for NATO, we're now going into what is called the Defense and Deterrence Posture Review for NATO. And what we have made clear to our allies, especially our NATO allies, is that we will not do anything unilaterally about these weapons, especially the tactical weapons, and that our engagement will be with them and at NATO and directly, and then with the Russians, but that we're looking to move this issue forward after the NATO deterrence and defense posture review is completed. So we have made clear that we are very interested in engaging in this conversation. We believe that it's important for our national security. The characterization of these weapons being much smaller, being much more portable, causes us to be as concerned as we can be about their safety and security. But at the same time, while they are characterized often as political weapons by ourselves and many of our European allies, that has not achieved widespread agreement. And so what's important is that we make clear that we're not going to make our own decisions on this. This is part of the NATO strategic deterrent. We make those decisions at that very big table of 28, and then we will then engage the Russians. But I think you have to see that there are a number of different steps that have to be taken by others in concert with us before we get to the Russians. But this is a #1 conversation that we intend to have with the Russians when the time is right and when we're ready to do it.
All right. I think there was a couple other hands. Yes, right here in the middle, up front, Freddie. My esteemed member of the Board of Directors, Christine Wing.
Thanks. Whoops. I'm Chris Wing from the Center on International Cooperation at New York University. Thank you,
Chris.
Madam Secretary. Hello.
My pleasure.
This is actually back to the CTBT and a question about the Senate debate. How important do you think that the decisions of the other non-ratifying Annex II countries will be in that debate?
No, I think that I didn't mention that because it's one of those things we talk about in conversation all the time, but I see people's eyes glaze over when they say, well, isn't that nice that all those other countries will go forward after we go, and why should I be influenced by what somebody might do? And we all know that the math is very important here because having the treaty in force isn't just about us, although we are the first domino that could cause everybody to go. So I think it is very important. We've also made clear to our allies and friends who are deeply interested in our ratification of CTBT, because they've already been there and done that, that this cannot be about international pressure. This cannot be about international influence. So we've kind of taken that whole issue off the table. This has to be about us. It has to be about our national security. It has to be about the safety and security and reliability of the stockpile. It has to be a science-based conversation. And it needs to be a less politicized, more bipartisan conversation. If we can keep our focus on those elements, I think we'll be fine. We have lots of people that want to help influence us, lots of parliaments and lots of heads of state that want us to go and do it and want to let the American people know that they want us to do it. And I remind them that they don't vote here. And although that may be something we need to think about. Only kidding. But this is about the American people and the Senate and the administration making the case. And I think that those are the grounds under which ratification will be perfected, and that is where we need to go. But I take your point that there is something fundamentally more important than just one more person ratifying, because we do have tremendous influence and sway on the other states that would ratify and then bring the treaty into force.
Okay. Yes, again in the rear towards the window, Freddie. Is that? Yes.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you very much for your very encouraging remarks. It's Anne Penketh from
Yes,
BASIC.
Anne. Good to see you again.
On the CTBT. Would you expect President Obama to get personally involved in the CTBT ratification process as he did in START? And from what you just said about the parliaments, when he goes to Europe in the next week or so, would you expect him to talk about the CTBT and nuclear issues?
I don't expect him to talk about it when he's in Deauville, for example, next week or the week after. But, you know, I'm not in control of his conversations when they're one-to-one with heads of state. But I will tell you that the president was enormously engaged and personally very, very impactful in the New START debate. Frankly, we couldn't have done it without the president, the vice president, Secretary Clinton, and Secretary Gates. So it was very, very, very important that we keep that going. The president, when he makes the case, is so unambiguous and so very, very powerful that I expect that he will be part of this. But once again, the president is so busy, we can't depend on the fact that he's going to be the guy that's going to carry us over the finish line. So there are many people on this team, people in the White House, people in the State Department, and people in the Energy Department and other places, and we will make this narrative as short and concise and understandable as it needs to be for the general public and for people that are interested in the debate, and as opaque and complicated as it has to be for people that are scientists and others that really understand this. And so that's the tension point. The tension point is to get it in the sweet spot where we can take it to the people in an understandable way, knowing that it is something that is enormously complicated. If you took, you know, I represented the 10th Congressional District in California, some of the smartest people in the world, not because they elected me 7 times, that's just a coincidence. But they did work at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They did work at Sandia, California. And the largest number of graduates from the University of California, Berkeley, who liked the sun but didn't go to school in the sun, came to my district to live. So 65,000 of them. So really smart people. And I think if you just took a bunch of them that weren't necessarily involved in the labs and asked them whether the United States had ratified the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty or not, they'd probably say, of course. I think most Americans think we did. They take the fact that we have an executive order and we haven't tested for nearly 20 years to be the law, and it's not. And they don't understand what the impact of our ratification would mean on entry into force, and what it means for bad guys, and what it means for our ability to hold people accountable. And that's the case we have to make. We have to do it on many different levels and many different levels of sophistication. But in the end, I'm sure the President will be involved because he is the best messenger we have.